Today I'll be making this floating storage cabinet to hold my grinder. Unfortunately, I didn't have any materials for the project, so I had to start out taking a trip to Lowe's to pick up a sheet of plywood. Luckily, it's not very far away and I can usually park right up by the door. Depending on the project, I'll usually have them cut the sheet in half because I'm fat and old and it makes loading it in the truck and getting it on the table saw a lot easier. Lowe's refers to the product as blondewood, and I'm not sure what the face veneer is. It has 7 internal layers plus the 2 face veneers for a total of 9. I use my sliding table saw to rip and cross-cut the parts to size. On my other Unisaw, I swap out my regular blade for a box joint cutter. It can cut either a 1/4 or 3/8 of an inch wide depending on the blade orientations. Here it's set up for a 3/8 wide inch cut, and I'll use it to cut both my sides as well as my top and bottom parts. Next I set my blade height and fence position to cut the sides. Then I cut the grooves. I do some test cuts on the top and bottom pieces and slowly sneak up to a nice snug fit. Once I'm happy, I cut the other parts. And that's it for the cabinet joinery. I give the parts a quick sanding to knock any fuzz off of them. Then it's time for the cabinet assembly. I'm using Titebond 2 wood glue and my 15 gauge finish nailer. I love this nail gun. Before the glue sets, I check the cabinet for square and then add a diagonal brace. Next I rip my draw parts. I won't be using draw slides, it'll just be a friction fit, so I like them to fit nice and snug. I cross-cut them on the miter saw using a stop block to ensure that both parts are the exact same length. Now I'll cut the groove in my draw parts to accept the plywood draw bottom. I didn't swap the blade out for a dado head, I just used my standard blade and I'll do it in a couple passes. I just have to dimension the draw bottom and the parts will be ready for assembly. Better make sure everything fits before I get the glue out. Again, I'm using Titebond 2 and my 15 gauge nail gun. I like to use these disposable paint brushes to spread the glue. You can reuse them for a pretty long time if you keep them wet in a glue container. I didn't do any joinery on this draw, it's just butt joints, wood glue, and nails. It should be plenty strong for what I'm going to do with it. Checking the draw for square, and it's pretty good. Once the glue dries, I give it a bit of a sanding. Check it for fit. Maybe sand a little more. That'll probably work. And here I'm adding some nailers. Of course, I'll actually use screws to mount it to the wall, but calling them screwers seems a bit weird, right? Here I'm cutting some merenti deck boards to length to make moldings for the face of the draws. Merenti looks a bit like mahogany, but it's much cheaper and it's really not as nice. I rip them in half to just under 1 3/4 inches so I get 2 out of the 1x4, and then I'll give them the L profile. I mark the bottoms of the moldings off of the cabinet, but you have to be careful cutting them upside down on the miter saw as it's really easy to blow out the grain. A little light sanding and I'm ready to spread the glue. Again, it's Titebond 2, but this time I'm not able to use my 15 gauge nail gun because it doesn't accept nails short enough. So instead, this time I'm using an 18 gauge brad nailer and shooting 3/4 inch long brads so they don't blow through the back of the draw front. Then I'll add some clamps just to get everything aligned a little bit better, and there it is. After the glue dries, I remove the clamps and then it's time for... oh no, more sanding. Only weirdos and insane people like sanding, but you gotta do it because rounding over the corners makes all the difference. For a finish for shop projects, I like to use boiled linseed oil and mineral spirits. I mix them about 1:1 by eye. It's not super critical. It's a very forgiving finish as far as you don't have to worry about drips and streaks, and if dust gets in the project in your dirty old wood shop, it's not an issue. You can just brush it off anytime before it completely dries. Just slop it on and let it soak in. I screw a cleat to the wall to support the cabinet while I drive the screws. Measure and drill for my 16-inch wall stud spacing, and then 4 screws and the cabinet is hung. I put the drawer in place and then the grinder gets its new home. I almost forgot the draw pull. I'll put a spare grind wheel in the drawer, test the light, and there it is. My new grinder station, finished and mounted, ready for years of service. If you like this video at all, maybe think about subscribing to my channel. I mean, why wouldn't you?